Hey guys, okay, so let's go ahead and start on building our background knowledge on photosynthesis. So some of you might already know what photosynthesis is, but I'm gonna go ahead and start reading where it says right here, what can a tiny plant do that you can't do? So this tiny plant can use energy of the sun to make its own food. You can't make food by just sitting in the sun. Plants are not the only organisms that can get energy from the sun. However, some protists, such as algae and some bacteria, can also use energy of the sun to make their own food. Question number 1. Plants use energy from the sun to, is it create carbon dioxide, make their own food, make more plants, or create more leaves? Go ahead and answer that question before we move on to what is photosynthesis. All right, so if a plant gets hungry, it can't walk to a local restaurant and buy a slice of pizza. So how does a plant get the food it needs to survive? Plants are producers. We already learned this, which means that they are able to make or produce their own food. They also produce the food of other organisms. Plants are also autotrophs. Autotrophs are organisms that collect the energy from the sun and turn it into organic compounds. Using the energy from the sun, they produce complex organic compounds from simple inorganic molecules. So once again, how does a plant get the food it needs to survive? Well, it gets the energy from the sun and it uses that energy to make and create its own food. So question number 2. What is another name for plants? And remember, it says check all that apply. So that means you want to make sure that you pick more than one. So is it a consumer, which means like, does it eat its own food? Is it a producer? Does it make its own food? Is it an herbivore? It only eats plants. Or is it an autotroph? It uses the energy from the sun to create its own food. All right, let's move on. Through photosynthesis is the process plants use to make their own food from the sun's energy. Carbon dioxide and water. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water combine with solar energy, which is the energy from the sun, to create glucose, a carbohydrate, C6H12O6, and oxygen. So this process can be summarized as, in the presence of sunlight, carbon dioxide and water combine together to create glucose and oxygen. So remember the oxygen that you breathe. What is the process that plants use to make their own food? Is it photosynthesis, cellular respiration, reproduction, or the water cycle? That one should be super easy. What is needed for plants to make their own food? So again, like what are the reactants? So go back over here, right? What do you need for plants to make their own food? Is it sunlight, carbon dioxide, and oxygen? Is it water, sunlight, glucose? Is it sunlight, carbon dioxide, water? Or is it glucose and oxygen? What do plants make after going through photosynthesis? So what are your products? So is it sunlight, carbon dioxide, oxygen, water, sunlight, glucose, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, or is it glucose and oxygen? Again, if you forgot, like go back up here and look at this equation. All right, so what is glucose, right? So glucose is the main product of photosynthesis. Glucose is a sugar that acts as food source for plants. So glucose is the food that plants use for energy. So after they make glucose, the glucose is then converted or turned into something usable, which is called ATP. It's a type of chemical energy during cellular respiration. The oxygen formed during photosynthesis, which is necessary for animal life, is essentially a waste product of the photosynthesis process. So photosynthesis doesn't need oxygen. So during that time, it'll just release it into the air for other animals and plants to use. So again, what is glucose? Is it a type of protein? Is it a type of fat? Or is it a type of sugar? And then the last question is, do plants use the oxygen that they create during photosynthesis? No, oxygen is a waste product and the plants release it into the air. Or yes, plants use the oxygen that they create during photosynthesis. When you're done, go ahead and press that next button because we are done with this section. Thanks for stopping in.